Top stories at 10. Violence in schools is reaching alarming proportions, and there are calls for authorities to urgently deal with the issue. Our reporters are standing by at various places of learning nationwide. And of course, let's explore that particular topic right now. And we're joined by academic, that's Dr. Mamphela Ramphele. She is weighing in on the spate of violent incidents in schools recently. She says gangsterism is flourishing where there is widespread violence. Mamphela Ramphele is she says that this issue, if left unchecked, ordinary citizens may begin to take the law into their own hands. She joins us now from our Cape Town studios. Dr. Ramphele, thank you very much for your time. The first question I want to ask of you is, what in your view is perpetuating this scourge of gangsterism in schools?
Good morning, Brody. The issue of gangsterism in schools is a reflection, it's a mirror to our face as a society about the violence in our society. And the root cause of that violence is the structures that we inherited from apartheid, which we have failed to transform over the last 25 years. Most of the children in this country, 65% of young people in this country grow up without knowing and or living or being emotionally supported by their biological fathers. This leaves a huge void. It means that the single mothers have to leave their children to be brought up by streets, by neighbors, by peers, and this is where the problem of the foundations of children's development of their identity, their self-worth, their self-confidence gets really undermined. So we as a society should not turn our anger at the children for doing what is a display of our failure to bring them up as self-confident, self-respecting and respectful young people. So I believe that we are being given an opportunity through this pain, through this crisis, to take a look at how we support families that are struggling to bring up children, particularly single-parent families and child-headed families. Second, what do we do in the school system? Because we have the gift of life orientation in our school system, but we are not using that curriculum space to do what some of the school systems like the LEAP school system is doing, which is use the space to help young people sitting together around tables to talk about who they are, what are their challenges in their homes, what are the things they are wrestling with about who am I, what is the place of my culture in a society that is dominated by having rather than being, and how does Ubuntu help every person to feel important, not because of what they have, but because they are human. And the teachers we put in classrooms that are overcrowded, we are not supporting our teachers sufficiently because many of those teachers were themselves brought up in families where they didn't have positive role models necessarily. So I think we have a chance, and I like MEC Panyaza Lesufi's energy. But I think that energy needs to be supported by structural changes that use the existing resources to do something different. We can't look at this as a policing matter. It is a socio-economic, psychosocial problem.
Dr. Ramphele, I'd like to actually, now that you bring up the name of the Gauteng Education MEC, Panyaza Lesufi, in that opinion piece you wrote on the News 24 website, you take issue with the statement made by the MEC on the back, of course, of the stabbing of a pupil at Forest High. You say, and these are his words, We would like, he says, that the issue of matric certificates, we would like to issue, rather, matric certificates as opposed to death certificates. What is the problem with that statement?
I think the statement is a cry of agony on his part. What he sees is the carnage in the school system. Now we need to go beyond looking at issuing matric certificates, because if we support the young people in our schools sufficiently, no child who is loved, well supported, and feels confident becomes violent. So the death certificates are a signal of our failure, but solely focusing on the matric certificate is what has got us to where we are. We did not pay attention sufficiently over the last 25 years to the issue of the wounds of humiliation that the parents of these pupils in our schools today and got during the apartheid period, but continue to get, given the level of unemployment, the level of poverty, the kind of horrific circumstances in which many young people grow up. How can children grow up in the filth, in the desperation of the shacks that are at the periphery of most of our cities? We are
actually challenge you on this particular point.
Look at our socioeconomic system.
Let me challenge you a little bit on this particular point and say to you, and I'm sorry for interrupting, and say to you, is it fair, though, to blame MEC Lesufi for behavior that is shaped by the lived experiences of these children from the communities from which they come? Because one pupil actually commented at that school here in Gauteng where a pupil was stabbed, saying that we can't blame teachers for the failures of our parents.
I am not blaming MEC Lesufi. I'm simply saying his cry of agony at seeing what's happening should be a call to action by society to address those societal problems. So I'm not putting the blame on him. I'm just saying, in fact, I applaud him for his energy and saying that let's turn the focus on using the existing system. Now, MEC Panyaza Lesufi has life orientation in the school system. It's not something he needs to create. It's there already. Can we not use the unemployed graduates who are walking our streets, and some of them also get tempted to become gangsters because they are not employed? Can't we train them to support teachers so they can run these life orientation periods in a very creative way? In most schools, life orientation are free periods, instead of the time as in the LEAP school system that you find in Langa, in Diepsloot and other places, as periods where both teachers and pupils become self-reflective. Who am I? What is my culture? How do I celebrate who I am?
Dr. Ramphele, in the interest of time, just a quick response on this particular point, which you also raise in that article. You say you also touch on the issue of fairness and equality before the law, that it needs to be seen to be the reality, regardless of your position or status in society. With those words then, so what example needs to be set against public and private sector leaders who have been implicated in issues of corruption and abuse of power?
Well, we know from global studies that gangsterism thrives where ordinary people see powerful leaders in the public and the private sector getting away with murder, literally. And so with widespread corruption in both the public and the private sector, we need to be seen, our judicial system, our law enforcement system, needs to be seen to be applied with the same vigor that is applied to ordinary people when they break the law. if we don't show this fairness, this equality under the law in our country, then ordinary people will take the law into their hands, which is what is driving much of the violence in our society. So we need to do the right thing. And thank God for the Zondo Commission. It is revealing to us the depth of the unethical, corrupt practices in our society. We need to clean up. Then our children can grow up in a society that has got morals and ethics that speak to behaving in ways that are in accordance with Ubuntu.
Very, very briefly then, Dr. Ramphele, what is your message to parents who are absent in the lives of their children?
I would like to appeal to every man who knows he has children that he hasn't paid attention to present himself to someone else who can help him come to grips with what that means. Because these men who have abandoned their children are not necessarily bad people. Many of them were abandoned by their own fathers. So we have a very long legacy through the migrant labor system where deliberately African families were deliberately destroyed by the migrant labor system that has made the mining industry the rich industry that it is today. We need, as a society, to come behind those families in the Eastern Cape, in Lesotho, in the Free State, everywhere where they are, and mend the egos of men and reshape manhood as a state of caring responsibility, and use the physical power that men have as power to protect and not power to brutalize.